Hello and welcome to week 4. And here we are talking about one of the topics that's kind of important in dealing with advanced editing courses, and that is the use of external resources. Now, we're going to talk about the program After Effects. And After Effects is the sort of thing that you could have a whole course in. So I'm just being honest with you. It's a very powerful program that does a lot of very impressive things. But not all of them are particularly useful on a daily basis. It's kind of like the sand wedge or the bridge. It's like you're playing pool. You got that bridge that you pull out every once in a while. That's kind of what After Effects is in the context of this course, meaning that there are some people who may use it all the time for various things. But if you're just editing video together, this is going to be the sort of thing you would pull out if there's a particular effect you want to do, or if there is something unusual going on with your video that you need to fix. And so that's the context we're going to talk about it in. Okay. So here we are. We're talking about Adobe additional resources, and this is particularly in the Adobe program, and I've really got to tip my hat to them. They have done this pretty well, and they also saw a vision that not everybody saw at the time they were doing it, I'll admit that. So, advanced editing. If you're going to be doing things that involve more than just putting shots together, every once in a while things like this come in handy. Now, the first thing I want to describe is the Adobe Suite. Now, the word suite is used here, and I believe that's the correct way of spelling it in this particular context. It isn't sweet like in candy and stuff like that. But if you have a hotel suite instead of a hotel room, that means you have different rooms associated with it. And the same thing is true of the Adobe programs. So if you get the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, you suddenly have access to all of those programs, and I bet you at least 2/3 of them you've never heard of before and may not actually even use. But that's not to say that they shouldn't be there. They're just things that you may not have thought to use and things that haven't come up yet. And so in this particular case, Adobe has a suite of programs that all come together in their Adobe Creative Cloud. Some of these programs are used more than others. Some are very specialized, and those are oftentimes the things that's really good to know, but you may not have the opportunity to get really good at using them specifically. So you may be an After Effects guru or an Adobe Audition guru, or it could be that some of these programs you may use all the time. It all depends on what you do. Okay, the programs all work together. Now I put an exclamation point there, as you can see, which means that this is important. I have a love-hate relationship with big software companies like Adobe. So let me explain, the hate part of it. I don't like the fact that that some of the original programs that went into the Adobe Suite used to be owned by independent companies, and now suddenly you can only get them in the context of Adobe Suite. But at the same time, the upside to that is that one program can call the other, like tag team wrestling or something like that, and they interface. They sort of fit together, which is something that is a very useful thing. So Premiere and Photoshop are programs that usually you use by themselves. You do your video editing in Premiere, you do your image editing in Photoshop. They tend to stand alone. After Effects works with Premiere. Now, some people do use After Effects on its own, and there's nothing wrong with that. It can be a very useful program. But usually when you're doing After Effects, you're taking a piece of video and you're doing some specialized stuff to it. So if that's in context of something else, you can actually do that from within Premiere, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about. Audition works the same way. Adobe Audition is an audio editing program, and some people use that on its own. But if you're in Premiere, you can do this in the context of audio for video, and you're going to find that can really be helpful. So let's talk about After Effects first, and I'll give you a demonstration of this, and we'll see how this is going. Anything is possible in After Effects. After Effects is kind of a spooky program in that regard because all kinds of crazy things can happen in After Effects. And that's where one of those deals where you look at a piece of video and you got no idea if it's real or not. So something can look perfectly real, but it's actually a very strange After Effects composition. After Effects uses the same animation functions as Premiere, but includes a lot more effects, and some of which are very specialized, and some of which require a great deal more attention. The program is designed for the specialized manipulation of video clips, and so basically any program or any clip in your Premiere composition, your sequence, you can then throw into After Effects. So as I said, this program is a topic of study in itself. If you need it, call on it. It's as close as Premiere. So if you're actually in Premiere, you don't have to say, oh my gosh, I got to suddenly learn After Effects. Well, half of the problem getting into After Effects is that when you open it up, you don't even know what it's supposed to do. If you open from Premiere, you at least have the context of the video clip, and it's at least got it's got all of the defaults set already, so that when you use it, it can automatically interface with Premiere after the fact. Okay, so After Effects, you can fix a particular clip. So any clip in your sequence, you can call After Effects to fix. Right-hand clicking on the clip can make it an After Effects composition. So when you send it to After Effects, you're basically telling it, whatever this clip is, make a composition based on it, and then send it back to After Effects, or send it back to Premiere. And this may put a strain on some of the computer resources, but it's worth it. So let me explain what I mean by that. After Effects is a powerful program. Premiere is a powerful program. The more programs you have open and running on your computer at any given time, the more your computer is working. So if you are in a situation where you're running a lot of programs, that can become an issue. And so if you have a computer with limited resources, you really may not be able to take advantage of that without paying some kind of a price. And once you have applied After Effects, it will automatically update the files in Premiere. And that's really the important thing. So in a way, it just comes with without any strings attached. And so this is where you can kind of keep the genie in the bottle and pull them out only when you really need them. Okay, so here we are in Premiere, and I've got some video here to use as an example. I'm going to give you some backstory here. This video needs help, and it needs the kind of help that Premiere may not be able to provide on its own. And so we're going to go to After Effects for it. And so to give you a little background, I shot some of these images for another class, and I was trying to demonstrate camera moves, but Murphy was with me in that I did not have access to my tripod only because I didn't have the appropriate tripod plate, and I couldn't go back and get it because everything's on lockdown. So I had to do this handheld where I would have preferred to use a tripod. And it only really shows up in the close-up part. So if I were to demonstrate this particular shot here, which as you can see is of a church steeple. So if I bring this to the beginning and I play some of this, you'll see how awful that shot is at that point. And if I zoom out, by the time I get to the wide shot, it's not so bad. And then, of course, you zoom out further, and it's even better. But obviously, I can't do a thing with that close-up shot. If I were depending on this video for something, I would simply have to say, no, I'm sorry, I didn't get the shot. But if I were to, first of all, let's zoom in on this. So if you see that particular section here. So now we're looking at only this clip. So this clip is what we're talking about here. And in this particular case, I didn't include any audio. There was natural sound there, but I deleted it because I'm going to be talking about something else. Now, if I right-click on this video, I get this big dialog box here. And if I go way up to the top, and, oh, look, Murphy's Law. Hold on a second. So if I go to if I take myself out of it, I'm going to try this again. So if I right-hand click and I go up high enough, I can find this little thing which says replace with After Effects composition. So If your computer can handle it, which most relatively recent computers can, this will be the ticket. So I'm going to click on that, and what you'll see is it will open up After Effects. And so After Effects is a completely separate program within the Adobe Suite, but there it is. And so it opens up this new project. And the first thing that it does, which is important to understand, is it gives you the opportunity to save the composition. So I'm going to save this as church_steeple, and I'm going to hit save. And so that means that the Adobe program understands that particular shot as a composition. So if I look at it here, now we're looking at After Effects rather than Adobe Premiere. And so you can see that it follows some different rules here. Now this is the part we really can't tolerate, is that camera shake. And so the reason I'm showing you this first is because it is actually very easy. So if I go to the Effects tab up here, the Effects menu, I'm going to go into Distort, which you would think would be the opposite. We're trying to undistort it. And so what I'm going to do is go way down the bottom and see where it says Warp Stabilizer. This is a quick way of fixing a big problem. So if I hit Warp Stabilizer and you look over here, you will see that it is figuring itself out. You can see that it is literally going through and working with each frame, performing an analysis. Now, if you look over here, analyzing in background, step 1 of 2, what it's doing is it's looking at the video and trying to figure out what stability looks like, and then figuring out where it's not stable. And so what it will ultimately do is find a scheme to stabilize the video. And this actually works. And so as you can see, it's supposed to be done in like 10 seconds. It's still working on it. And this is a 474 frame video. So it's almost there. Now it's stabilizing it. So you see there it's going. And now suddenly, let's see if we play some of this. Now you can see the natural camera movement, but you're not seeing the incredible shake involved, right? So that's fixed the problem. Now let's demonstrate what you would do next. Now first of all, I want to save this because I want to be able to go back to it. So I'm going to save the project, and then in this case I'm going to go ahead and exit After Effects. We'll go back to it for something else. Now look what it's done here. It has replaced the entire video with a pink one. So now, let's see, and what I'll do is I will apply that cross dissolve. Let's see if I can do that. And let's see what we got. So notice the shot is now a lot more stable. Now it is not perfect. It would be a whole lot better if I used the tripod, but it did in fact do something. So if you look at that, that looks like normal camera movement instead of camera shake. And so there you have it. And so that is an example of what you can do with After Effects. And so it's made a big difference. Now, why don't we try something else? So let's say that we're into let's say we want to have some fun here. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Let's say I find another shot. And let's see if that shot is useful in itself. Okay, so there is a shot of a boat on a river. And please ignore the noise. That's for our next example. I'll just go ahead and move this over here. We got a boat on the river. And we zoom out with it. And right now I'm going to just basically say that that shot is okay for our purposes, but I want to have some fun. So let's say I zoom that in a little bit so I can see it better. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to replace with After Effects composition. After Effects opens, and this will be a brand new project. And once again, I get to name this again, and I'm just going to call this Weird. How about just make a weird video here? And so here we have our video in an After Effects composition. And so it looks very much like Premiere, but there are a few things that you might be able to do that you couldn't do necessarily otherwise. Right now, this is a raw file. There's nothing being done to it that's unusual. So let's look at some of our effects. I'm going to go into Distort here. And I'm going to go to this thing called Flow Motion. And this is, if you want instant weird, this is one way to get it. Now, Flow Motion, if you look over here, now we got our effects controls. See, it's very much like the way Premiere works. And we have these things called knots. And so if you look at what a knot is, and you're going to choose, there's knot 1 and knot 2. It comes with 2 of them. And so if you don't want to use this, of course, you don't have to. In fact, this may be the wrong thing to do. But if I were to grab this little point over here and move it, you can see it creates a black hole on the video. It does weird stuff to the video. Wow, that's weird. And so, kind of like a bad trip or something like that. You see it does the same thing there. And so it literally creates kind of like a typhoon in the video. So right now I'm going to leave that alone. But what if I wanted to make that happen over time? I could hit that stopwatch and make it increase. What I'm going to do instead is I want to see if I can look at the video and apply that in a systematic fashion. So let's say we got the video, we see that the boat just kind of pans along, nothing unusual, and then we zoom out. What if we wanted that distortion to follow the boat and to appear to get smaller as the boat got smaller? So I know that's a bit of a tall order, and I'm only going to do it with one of them, but let's go ahead and try that. Now, first of all, you see where this little white thing is? That's where that knot is. So you see there it is. So I'm going to move it, I'm going to distort it just a little bit so we can see it. So that is our knot. Kind of looks like Jupiter's red spot. And remember, this is knot 1. Now notice if I go up here, I got these coordinates. I can move that knot. I can draw it like a pencil. Now let's say I want that knot to appear. Let's pretend that these boaters, these boat people, are somehow they've created hyperdrive. And so that's their boat engine. They're sort of flying around with hyperdrive. And so now notice if I do that, it almost works right off the box. So let's say we go to the beginning here. Let's let the program catch up with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that knot follow the boat. And so to do that, I'm going to go to knot 1, and I'm going to click on that stopwatch. And at this point, this is the very beginning of the video, I'm going to position that right on the tail of that boat. And if I gradually move this, now notice it's already wrong. So when we get to this point, we'll kind of correct it. So at that point, so let's see if it stays corrected. Almost. Down here, it kind of went wrong again. So we can put in as many keyframes as we need. And there may even be an automatic way we can do this. Now here, by this point, it kind of went to the left a little bit. So I'm going to sort of center that, maybe move it back out a little bit. And at this point, let's just move it up some and to the right. And so here, and you can see we can actually spend more time on that than it's worth. But if you wanted to get that effect, it may take a while. So you can see how you can make the effect appear to follow the boat on a regular basis. And you can spend hours doing this. So let's say that we'll kind of take a shortcut here, and so we'll account for this movement and see how much good that does. Actually, that covered most of that, so that little spot there. So now, as we zoom out, let's see what happens when we zoom out. As we zoom out, see what happens. We lose it. So what if I wanted to keep that distortion to appear to be the same? So at this point, I would go to my amount, and I would click on that stopwatch too. And so I'm going to make sure that it's got a keyframe there. So I'm just a little bit of a bump there. So then, as we start to zoom out, notice how that appears to get bigger. I'm just going to go ahead and scooch that down a little bit. And I'm going to move it down back where it was. Now let's see if that made any difference. So if I go back here, it did appear to, as we go out, it gets a little smaller. And I'm not saying that this is perfect, but if you wanted to, you could do some pretty interesting stuff with this. Now let's say we wanted to do something that's not quite so dramatic, even though we obviously already are. If we go to our effects, there's all kinds of other things. So for example, if we go into something like noise and grain, we can make it look like an old film. So if I put dust and scratches, I can make it look like actually that's horrible, but we can give it that old filmy look, and you may be able to see a little bit of how that works. Actually, it may not be showing up all that well. And these are things that you can try if you want to. And I'm not sure that this would apply to all of your videos, but you certainly have the ability to do all kinds of interesting things that you want to try. And so that would be one useful tool. So let's move on to Adobe Audition in the same function. So here, this is what we call audio sweetening. Now, audio sweetening is a term that comes up in the video industry, and that is when you have an audio that is sour and tastes awful, and you got to put a little sugar on there. So what audio sweetening does is when something somewhere is wrong and you want to fix it. So for example, audio editing can be very difficult in Premiere. Premiere wasn't designed for audio editing. Audition really was. Audition allows you to do much more with audio in a controlled environment. And so this can involve fixing some very specific errors. Audition includes special tools for this job, which we'll go over a couple of those. And really, the first one that comes to mind is the graphic equalizer. And let me explain what the graphic equalizer is in a relatively simple fashion. Now, most of you are probably not old enough to remember the old television sets with a little audio controller's volume, and then there was something called tone. And you turn the tone one way and it sounds a little sharper, you turn the other way, it sounds more bassy. That is a really horrible way of adjusting audio. Now, on your old stereo, what they used to call a hi-fi, you get three little dials, one of them called bass, the other called treble, and the other called mid. And so if you turn up the bass, it gets a little boomier, and if you turn up the treble, it gets a little hissier, and the mid is supposed to be something like that. But then the rich people, they had this box with all these little bitty sliders on there, and you can move up and down, and those would be all of the little spots in between bass and treble, which will allow you to grab certain frequencies and boost them a little bit. And then the really, really rich people, the musicians, may have one that's got like 24 little sliders. Well, guess what? All those things are junk now. Basically, the computer can do that a whole lot easier, and so you can have as many little slider things as you want because they don't really exist anymore. They just come in as little controls on the computer. And so that's why that's particularly useful. You also have the ability to look at the audio as a spectrum. And so if there's a noise, like a dinging sound, you can actually see that, and you can get rid of it. We'll talk about that. And then you can do basic noise reduction. And so maybe that's all you need to do, but you can. And so you can go to Audition for help if you need it. And so that's what we're going to talk about with an example. Okay, so here I am back in Premiere, and I'm going to sort of zoom out a little bit so you can see where we were. And again, there's our church steeple where we fixed it, so that's no longer quite as bad. And so if you look at it in Premiere, if I play that, you can see that it's no longer, that's almost acceptable. I wouldn't consider that an A+ shot, but it does work. And then if you look over here, we've got our boat, and so our boat now has the little warp going along behind it. So you can see that it's working at it. It's not playing it perfectly real time, but I got a lot of other things going on here now as well, and so that might explain it. Okay, but it does work. So now, maybe you've wondered why I've got this ugly sound going on underneath it. That is a piece of audio from an industrial video that I shot once. And I didn't want to include the images there in case there were copyright issues. And so we're in the middle of a factory of sorts. And so all you hear there is factory noise. And so what I want to do is analyze some of that noise for you and show you how you can maybe get rid of some of it. And so, for example, you can hear people talking in the background. What if you actually wanted to hear what they said? It's actually possible to get some of that back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-hand click on this, and once again we get our thing here. And so there you can just barely see it. Edit clip in Adobe Audition. So if I do that, what it will do is it will basically open Audition for us. Okay, and so here is the clip in Audition. And you can see, we're getting two different audio systems here, but you can see how that works. Now, there's if this were silence, there'd be a flat line there. So this is anything but silence. And so what I want to do, first of all, I'm going to use this scale here to zoom in on some of this. Now you hear that beeping sound in the background? I wanted to show you that it's possible to see what that is. And so we have what's called a Spectral Editor. And you can get access to that right up here. And so if I click on that, you'll see this, which looks really weird. Now don't let this intimidate you. Let me show you something. You hear those beeps? I'm going to play that again. Look at these little striking lines there. You'll see those correspond to the beeps. See that? Now, what if I wanted to try to eliminate the beeps? They have a tool that does that, which is so doggone easy, it's almost scary. If you look up here, you see a little band-aid? Watch this. I just apply the band-aid, and notice how much that's no longer there. And let's say I just basically do that and that. I wonder what that sounds like now. You can still hear it, but not as much. And so, because some of that's down here, let's say. And so you can actually paint out. So part of that lived there. I'm just going to get rid of some of these other ones. And you can see that it does make some difference. So here, it is less. Doesn't get rid of it altogether. But that's actually, let's try that one. That was a lot louder. So if I go for that one, now let's play that. Now see, you can still hear the talking, but you can't hear that loud beeping as much. And so this is a way that you could enhance your video, your audio for video. And so if you actually wanted to use that shot, but you didn't want to hear that loud beeping in the background, that'd be a way of fixing it. Okay, now the last thing I'll show you here is a trick that can really, really help. So what we want to do is we want to find an area where there's nothing but noise. Because what I want to do is I want to take the average noise of that factory and get rid of it. Now, I'm not going to get rid of all of it, but it will help some. And that little section there might have been enough. So I'm going to turn off Spectral Editor here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that little piece there, because I didn't hear the beeping there, I just heard the noise. And so what I want to do is I want to remove that noise from the entire clip. And let's see how we do that. Now, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the computer to see that noise differently than everything else. So if I go over here to Effects and I go to Noise Reduction, what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture a noise print. You can hit Shift P if you know your keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to say that little section there, I'm going to call a noise print. And there it is. And I'm just going to hit OK. Now that didn't do anything except capture the noise print. Then if I go back to Noise Reduction Restoration and I say process the noise print, let's see what that would do. So if I look over here, I can see that I actually have some control over how much noise reduction I'm going to do and what effect that's going to have. And obviously there's only so much you're going to do with this, but I'm going to apply this. Now what I want you to do is watch the baseline. See, notice how thick that line is. If we can get that a little thinner, which we did, we've taken away at least some of the noise. And so notice how the words got a little brighter. I can almost understand what they're saying. So let's say I try it again. Now, I don't necessarily know that this is going to work, but if I go to Effects and I go to Noise Reduction, Capture Noise Print, hit OK, and then I go to Effects and I go to Noise Reduction and I process it, and let's say I hit it again, it's a little bit thinner. And you can actually almost hear what they're saying. And so this is not a magic bullet. It's not going to make bad audio good. But if you were, well, hypothetically, let's say you're working with the police department and they want to hear what something was going on. You know, you might be the sort of person that does that sort of forensic work. Or let's say that that you've recorded a speech that you can only get once. You know that you're not going to be able to re-record the speech, and there was a vacuum cleaner going on in the distance, and you remove that piece of audio. That may be enough to make a difference. You remove that, and now the problem is you're removing frequencies. So it's looking at all the frequencies where the noise is and reducing them. Now, those same frequencies appear in our voices too, so the voice is going to sound a little bit different. But the question is it better with it or without it? And that's something you would have to figure out. But again, once I'm done with this and I hit my little X over here, and then it's going to say to save the changes, yes, and now suddenly there is my updated audio down here, which is slightly better. So again, not perfect, but different. Okay, at this point, I have to give you one warning about these technologies, and that's something that I would be completely remiss if I didn't mention this, is that let's say you're editing in Premiere. You reach out to After Effects. That's a completely different universe. Now, what After Effects is going to do is it's going to take the clip from Premiere, move it into After Effects. Whatever it does in After Effects, it's going to render out as a completely different clip, which it's going to stick into Premiere. Now, the problem is you don't necessarily know where the clip that Premiere is playing when it plays that clip actually is. And so, if you don't actually have that location and something goes wrong in your computer, you're playing this in Adobe Premiere, and that media may disappear. And so just a warning, it happens every once in a great while. It happened to me once a long time ago and caused some issues. But Usually when you reopen Premiere, it will find all the clips it needs, including the whatever you've done in After Effects, and it will stick it where it belongs. If for some reason it doesn't, you may have to locate it. That's one of the reasons why when you first save your After Effects composition, when you go into After Effects, you've got to make sure you know where you saved that. And the same is true of your audio, your Adobe Audition files, because that is one little thing. Murphy loves those little details. And so if you give Murphy a chance to kick you, he will, trust me. But that's not to say don't do it. But what you do have to do is that when you've got your composition together, remember, you're always vulnerable when you're working in Premiere with the timeline, with all the little pieces of video there, because they're all in different places in the computer. Once you render it out as a completed file, you will never have to worry about that again. But make sure that you're ready to get to that point. So I'm not saying not to do it, but just be aware that you're making files that Adobe Premiere has to find. Usually it does, but if it doesn't, then you may have to either remake them or find them again or replace them with the originals. Just letting you know. Okay, so the point is that this is a way that you can take your project to the next level, and I feel that we would be remiss in a class on editing if we didn't talk about some of these advanced features. Now, of course, you can do a whole lot with After Effects, most of which you may never have to do. After Effects allows you to do keys on top of keys on top of keys. It allows you to create all kinds of distorted stuff. It's got some nice little built-in goodies that you can use. But in actuality, if you're doing general video work, it doesn't have to come up that much. But when you need it, you need it. You know, if you want to fix a problem or you want to add something that wasn't there before, it's a great way to go. And the same thing with Audition. You may go through parts of your career without needing audio sweetening. And if you can do that, my hat's off to you, because I can't. But anyway, that is how you defeat Murphy in Murphy's Law.